warning in the void. The galaxy was wide, endless, and full of empires that thought themselves eternal. Among them stood the Galactic Empire, a power so vast that even the mention of its fleets made weaker races bow. They ruled countless systems, and their banners flew over worlds with suns older than Earth itself. But one region of space was different. One patch of stars remained untouched, ignored, and spoken of only in whispers. That place was Terran space. The Empire's admirals had long noticed the quiet zone. No trade ships traveled through it. No mining guilds dared to step inside. It was a cage of silence, a void that felt wrong to even map. Whenever probes were sent, they returned broken or never returned at all. Still, the Empire laughed, saying humans were long gone or too weak to matter. Then came the signal. It was not a long message, not a complex code of warning. It was only a single broadcast, carried through the void on every frequency, a voice calm and cold, spoken words the galaxy could not ignore. Enter Terran space and you will not return. The word spread faster than light. Pirates heard it, merchants repeated it, and soon every admiral in the Empire sat in silence. As the recording played, some laughed, calling it a trick by rebels, others frowned, feeling the weight of history pressing on their hearts. For deep in the Empire's archives there were old records, old scars that spoke of war with humans long ago. Wars where human fleets had burned brighter than stars. Wars where even the strongest had bled, but the records were incomplete. Stories of Terran wrath had been buried, censored, or dismissed as fear tales for young cadets. So now the admirals mocked again, saying no primitive race could stand against the might of the Empire. Yet some captains, older and wiser, felt a chill. They remembered hearing whispers, stories from their grandfathers, stories of ships vanishing at the edge of Terran space, stories of weapons that should not exist. One such captain was Admiral Korath. He had fought in dozens of campaigns, crushed rebellions, and commanded fleets that burned entire planets into ash. But when the recording of the Terran warning ended, his scales shivered. He turned to his staff and whispered, "Do not cross that border, not yet." But his warning was drowned in the pride of younger officers who wanted glory. Far away, hidden deep within the dark of Terran space, humanity listened. The broadcast had done its work. It had stirred the galaxy. Human commanders watched from secret outposts, silent and waiting. For centuries they had prepared, while the galaxy slept. Earth built war machines in silence. They remembered the betrayals, the wars, and the chains once placed upon them. Never again would humanity be caught weak. Now they waited for the Empire to make a mistake, and humanity knew it would not take long. On the Imperial capital, the council chamber rang with debate. Prideful senators shouted, "Test them, send a fleet, and let the galaxy see that Terran space is only a myth." Others smirked. If humans were strong, they would not hide, they would not whisper threats in the dark. But no one could deny the unease in the room. The recording felt too real, too sharp, too confident. It was not the voice of weakness. It was the voice of a predator. And predators do not bluff. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, small species watched in silence. Some prayed that the Empire would ignore the warning. Others prayed the Empire would cross the line because they remembered something the Empire had forgotten. They remembered that when humanity fights, they do not stop. They remembered the cost of underestimating Earth. Still, pride is a heavy chain. The Empire was too proud, too vast, too certain of its strength. They had crushed so many before, why would humans be different? So they planned quietly to send a test fleet into the void, to prove the message false, to show the galaxy that the Empire feared nothing, but the void was watching. Every star in Terran space burned quietly, hiding shadows larger than fleets. Warships built in silence, massive and patient, waited under the black. Their weapons were ready, their commanders calm. The Empire laughs. The council chamber of the Galactic Empire glittered with gold, jewels, and banners of conquest. Every wall carried the story of victory, of enemies crushed under Imperial boots. And now, above the polished floor, the voice of the Terran warning echoed once more. "Enter Terran space and you will not return." The senators burst into laughter, their voices rising like thunder in the grand chamber. They mocked the message, saying it was nothing more than a desperate bluff. Humans, one senator sneered. A forgotten race hiding in shadows, too afraid to face us openly. Another laughed, slamming his clawed hand on the table. If they were strong, they would be part of the Empire by now. The Emperor, sitting on his throne of iron, leaned forward with cold eyes. He had ruled for centuries, feared across the galaxy. To him, this message was an insult, a challenge. And the Empire never ignored a challenge. Admiral Korath stood at the edge of the chamber, silent. He watched the prideful laughter, the arrogance, and felt a knot in his chest. He had seen too many battles to mistake confidence for strength. The voice in the warning was not weak. It was calm, controlled, like someone certain of victory. But his words were drowned out. Every senator demanded action. Every general called for war. The order came swiftly. "Send a fleet," the Emperor commanded. "Let the galaxy watch as Terran space is broken, and their warning turned to ash." Cheers rose in the chamber, but far from the capital, in the military stations orbiting the outer stars, officers were uneasy. They had heard stories, fragments of reports locked away, whispers that humans had once fought the galaxy and survived. Still, orders were orders, and no one disobeyed the Empire. The first fleet was assembled, 10 destroyers, fast and heavily armed, carrying banners of imperial pride. Their commander, Admiral Terran, was young and hungry for glory. He mocked the warning, recording his own message for the galaxy. "Terran space is ours now. Humans are nothing but dust." The transmission spread across the stars, merchants, pirates, and minor. Worlds all listened, they waited, eager to see what would happen. Inside Terran space, hidden sensors caught every word. Human commanders in their shadowed stations shared cold smiles. The trap was set. The Empire had stepped into their net. But humans would not strike yet. They wanted the galaxy to see. They wanted the galaxy to remember. The destroyers entered the edge of Terran space. One by one, their signals appeared on star maps across the galaxy. Audiences in far-off worlds leaned closer, whispering, waiting. Would humans answer, or would the fleet prove the warning false? Admiral Terran laughed on his bridge. "This is nothing but empty sky," he mocked. He ordered his ships deeper, their engines burning bright as they cut through the void. But with every jump forward, silence grew heavier. No stars seemed welcoming. No worlds greeted them, only the endless dark. The crew whispered among themselves. They felt as if unseen eyes were watching. Shadows seemed to follow them through the void. Every sensor sweep returned with strange echoes, as if massive objects hid just beyond reach. But Terran only laughed harder. "Ghost stories, that's all humans are," he shouted. Back in the capital, the council drank and celebrated. They broadcast the fleet's progress as proof of human weakness. "See," the senators declared, "nothing but empty words." And across the galaxy, small species shook their heads. They knew what was coming. They remembered. They whispered to each other. "The Empire has made a mistake." Hours later, the first ship vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. No signal, no explosion, just silence. On Terran's bridge, alarms blared, but he waved them off. "A malfunction," he said. "Weak human tricks." Then another ship disappeared. And another. By the time the fourth ship vanished, laughter had died. The crew sat in silence, fear spreading like fire. Still, Terran refused to accept it. "We are the Empire," he growled. "They cannot touch us." But his voice shook, and sweat ran down his scaled skin. In the council chamber, celebration froze. The live transmission ended abruptly, leaving only static. The senators stared in silence. Their laughter turned to unease. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, his hands curling into fists. For the first time in centuries, the Empire had no answer. Deep, within Terran space, a single human voice whispered into the void. "You were warned." The humans had given one warning, and one warning only. The next step belonged to the Empire, and when that step came, the galaxy would never forget. Shadows of old wars. The galaxy did not sleep that night. Across stations, colonies, and merchant routes, The same question echoed. What had happened to the Imperial fleet that dared to enter Terran space? No distress calls, no wreckage, only silence. The Empire tried to cover the truth, calling it technical errors, but whispers spread faster than lies. Everywhere, small species remembered old fears. They recalled stories their elders had once told in quiet voices, stories of a time when humanity was not silent, when humans had fought wars that shook the stars. Those stories were old, buried under centuries of propaganda, but now, with fleets vanishing, the shadows of those wars returned. In the vast archives of the Empire, hidden records lay untouched. Scrolls, data crystals, and ancient battle logs recorded humanity's fury. Most of the younger officers never read them. They thought them myths, exaggerated tales of a primitive species punching above its weight. But there were scholars who knew. There were veterans who remembered. One such scholar was Draylen Voss, a historian banished from the Empire's academy for speaking too loudly. He claimed that centuries ago, humanity fought not with numbers but with unmatched will. He told stories of human fleets outnumbered 10 to 1 yet fighting until their last breath. He spoke of weapons that should not exist, railguns that cracked capital ships in half, stealth craft that appeared like ghosts. No one believed him then, but now messages flooded his home. Tell us what you know, they begged. Meanwhile, Admiral Korath sat in silence on his warship. He remembered the lessons his grandfather had whispered to him as a child. The old man had fought near Terran borders long ago. He told Korath never to mistake humanity's silence for weakness. Humans are patient, he once said. They strike only when the enemy grows arrogant. Now Korath realized those words were not warnings. They were prophecies. Inside the Empire's command halls, the younger admirals laughed again. Old myths, they said. Ghost stories to scare children. They claimed the fleet's disappearance was sabotage or internal failure. But deep inside they felt unease, because silence is more terrifying than explosions. And humanity's silence was deafening. On distant mining colonies, alien workers shared hushed voices around their fires. They spoke of the last Terran war centuries ago, when the Empire had pushed into human territory and barely escaped. The Empire had erased that chapter, but survivors told the truth. Humans, do not stop, the old miners whispered. Once you awaken their fury, you cannot put it back to sleep. Far beyond the borders, in secret Terran bunkers carved into dead moons, humanity prepared. They studied the Empire's arrogance. They monitored transmissions and heard every laugh, every insult. The commanders were calm, their faces grim. They remembered their ancestors who bled in the old wars. This time would be different. This time they were ready. In a hidden chamber on Earth, the High Command met. Screens glowed with images of Imperial fleets, troop deployments, and the whispers of frightened species. General Armitage stood tall, his voice steady. The Empire has forgotten the cost of Terran wrath, he said. It is time they remember. The room was silent, not out of fear but out of unity. Every officer, every strategist knew what was coming. The Empire would not stop at one fleet. They would send more, and when they did, humanity would show the galaxy the truth. On the Imperial capital, the Emperor's anger burned. He demanded answers. He ordered scholars to dig into forbidden archives. He wanted proof that humans were nothing but weak shadows of the past. But when the old records were finally brought forth, even he hesitated, for in those dusty pages were battles where human ships stood against entire armadas, and survived. The council chamber grew cold as one line from the archives was read aloud. The Terrans warned us once before, and when we ignored them, 100 worlds burned. The younger senators laughed nervously. They said, old exaggerations, nothing more. But no one could explain why fleets were vanishing. No one could explain the silence, and deep down they knew. The shadows of old wars had returned. In the farthest reaches of space, in outposts barely clinging to life, alien captains listened to the echoes of that history. They sent quiet messages to one another. Stay away from Terran space, and they warned. Do not repeat the Empire's mistake. But the Empire was deaf to warnings. Pride was their anchor, arrogance their crown. they would not stop. They would march deeper into the void, and humanity waited, patient and calm, because the old wars had taught them one truth. Wrath delayed is wrath multiplied, and when the Empire finally understood, it would already be too late. The silent arrival. The Second Fleet left the Empire's docks with fire in their engines. This time it was not 10 destroyers, but 30 ships, heavy cruisers, carriers, and escorts. Their banners glowed against the stars, shining with imperial pride. The Council declared, "No myth will stand against us. We will crush this human bluff once and for all." Across the galaxy, billions watched the transmissions. Merchants stopped. Their trades, miners paused their drills, and even pirates sat silent at their comm screens. They remembered how the First Fleet had entered Terran space and never returned. Now everyone waited to see if the Empire's greater fleet would fare differently. Admiral Korath watched from afar, his heart heavy. He begged the Council not to send more ships, but his voice was ignored again. The younger admirals mocked him, calling him a coward. But Korath knew better. The humans had been silent for centuries, and silence was never the weapon of the weak. The fleet entered the borders of Terran space. Their signals lit up the star maps, their engines thundered across the void. For the first day, everything was calm. They traveled deeper, and no resistance came. Admiral Trovan, commander of the Eye. Fleet laughed and opened a channel to the galaxy. "You see nothing but lies, humans or shadows, nothing more." But the crews whispered. They felt it, that invisible weight pressing against their hulls. Sensors showed strange shadows in the dark. Something massive moved just out of sight. But whenever they turned their scanners, it vanished. It was as if the void itself was alive, watching, waiting. On the third day, the first ship went silent. No explosion, no warning, just silence. Its signal blinked out, erased from every map. Admiral Trovan barked orders, demanding answers, but the techs were pale, their hands shaking. Nothing touched them, one whispered. They were simply gone. Then another ship disappeared, and another. The fleet was still 30 strong when they entered, but now the numbers dwindled, not through battle, but through vanishing silence. No wreckage, no trace, only empty stars. The galaxy watched. In horror, broadcasts from the fleet cut off one by one. People whispered in fear. What kind of weapons could erase ships without a sound? Inside Terran space, humanity moved like ghosts. Massive warships drifted in the dark, their hulls cloaked against scanners. They were not eager to reveal themselves yet. Every disappearance was a message. Every silence, a warning. The Empire was not fighting an enemy they could see. They were fighting the unseen wrath of a patient predator. On the bridge of his cruiser, Trovan finally felt fear. His laughter was gone, replaced by sweat and trembling hands. He shouted to his officers, "Signal the Empire, request reinforcements." But no signal escaped. The comms were jammed, the stars themselves seemed locked away. It was as if Terran space had swallowed their voices whole. Back on the Imperial capital, silence filled the council chamber. For hours, no word came from their fleet. At first they mocked, then they grew nervous, then afraid. The Emperor sat in his throne, his claws tapping the iron armrests. "Why do they not answer?" he growled, and no one dared to reply. Meanwhile, on hidden stations within Terran space, human commanders spoke softly. "The Empire does not listen," one said. "They will keep coming." General Armitage nodded, his eyes sharp. "Then let them come," he whispered. "Each fleet that enters will vanish, until the galaxy remembers. Our warning." In the mining colonies on the galaxy's edge, alien families gathered around cracked radios. They heard the silence. No word from the Empire, no boasting, no victory, only silence. And silence was louder than any gun. By the fifth day, Admiral Trovan's fleet was gone. Every ship, every signal erased. The galaxy maps that once glowed, with Imperial banners, now showed only darkness. The Empire tried to hide the truth, but the galaxy had seen enough. Twice now, fleets had entered Terran space, and twice they had never returned. Whispers turned into fear. fear turned into respect, and respect turned into dread. The council debated again, their voices rising. "More fleets," one senator shouted. "Overwhelm them with numbers." "No," another cried. "We cannot waste ships into the void." The emperor's eyes burned, his pride torn between caution and rage. He stood, his voice echoing like thunder. "If the Terrans think they can frighten us with silence, then we will show them fire." But far away, deep in Terran space, the humans had already decided. The time for shadows was ending. The time to reveal. Their wrath was near, and when their warships finally showed themselves, the galaxy would tremble. Humanity unleashed. For weeks the galaxy had watched in silence. 2 fleets of the mighty Empire had entered Terran space, and both were gone. No wreckage, no distress calls, only empty stars. The galaxy trembled with questions, and whispers grew louder. What could erase fleets without a sound? The Empire, blind with pride, answered with fire. They sent not 30 ships, but hundreds. The Grand Fleet, banners stretching like wings across the stars, carriers, battleships, destroyers, all marching toward the Terran border. The Council declared, "No shadows will stand against us. Today the galaxy will see Imperial power burn away these ghosts." Billions tuned to the transmissions. Merchants paused their trades. Soldiers gathered in halls. Children hid behind parents. The galaxy could not look away, for if the Empire failed again, everything would change. The Grand Fleet crossed the Terran border. Engines roared. Signals lit up the maps. At first, silence greeted them again. No human ships appeared, no weapons fired, only the dark void waiting. Admirals laughed once more. "They are cowards," they said, "afraid to face us openly." But then the stars moved. At first the crews thought it was a trick of the eyes, but soon every sensor screamed. Colossal shadows emerged from the void, larger than any ship the galaxy had seen. The stars vanished behind their size, their black hulls glimmering with faint lines of light. One by one, Terran warships decloaked. They were not destroyers, not cruisers, but titans. Each ship was the size of a moon, built with cold patience across centuries. They had waited in silence, hidden in the dark. And now, humanity revealed their teeth. On the bridge of the lead Imperial carrier, Admiral Velok froze. His claws trembled as the screens lit up with hundreds of Terran warships. "This is impossible," he whispered. "No species could build such ships in secret." But the proof filled the sky. A channel opened. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy heard a Terran voice. Calm, steady, merciless. "You were warned," the voice said. "Enter Terran space, and you will not return." Admiral Velok screamed orders. "Open fire, unleash everything." The Imperial fleet roared to life, missiles streaking across the void, plasma cannons burning bright. But when the fire reached the Terran warships, the galaxy gasped. The blasts struck, yet the Terran hulls did not break. The shields glowed faintly, absorbing the fury like rain against stone. Then came the answer. The Terran guns awoke, railguns longer than cities charged, their barrels humming with energy. In a single volley, the void lit up like dawn. Imperial battleships shattered, their armor torn apart. Cruisers split in two, drifting lifelessly into the dark. Entire formations vanished in seconds, the galaxy screamed. Billions watching through broadcasts covered their mouths. For this was no myth, no ghost story. This was Terran wrath unleashed. Human commanders did not shout. They did not celebrate. Their voices were calm. Target acquired. Fire again. The second volley came, colder, sharper, deadlier, and more Imperial ships vanished into nothing. Admiral Velok begged for retreat, but their comms were jammed, their escape routes sealed. It was as if the void itself had closed its fist around them. The Terran fleet moved like hunters, their warships gliding with precision. Every strike was clean, every shot perfect. This was not battle. This was execution. On the Imperial capital, chaos erupted. The Council screamed at one another, demanding explanations. How could humans build such weapons? Why did no one warn us? The Emperor sat silent, his eyes fixed on the reports. For the first time in his reign, his empire had met an enemy greater than fear. On far-off colonies, alien miners wept. They had prayed for someone to stand against the empire. And now, in the silence of the stars, they saw hope. The humans had returned, and they had returned stronger than anyone dreamed. Within hours, half the Grand Fleet was gone. The survivors scattered, fleeing in every direction. But even as they ran, the Terran warships did not chase. They stopped at the border. Weapons, still glowing, the same voice echoed once more across every channel in the galaxy. You were warned. Silence followed, but this silence was not weakness. It was the silence of a predator who had struck, and would strike again if tested. The galaxy trembled. The Empire, once untouchable, now tasted fear. And humanity, long silent, had spoken louder than any empire ever could. The Empire trembles, y'all. Grand Fleet was broken. Hundreds of Imperial ships had entered Terran space, and now only fragments limped back. Engines sparked, hulls burned, comms filled with cries of terror. For the first time in living memory, the Empire had tasted defeat, and it was not defeat against an equal power, but against a race they had mocked as weak and forgotten. On the Imperial capital, silence filled the council chamber. The senators who once laughed now sat pale and trembling. Screens showed the ruins of once mighty warships drifting in the void. Wreckage burned like dying stars, proof of Terran fire. The Emperor's claws gripped his throne until the iron bent. His voice was cold, sharper than any blade. They were warned, he whispered, and still we laughed. The survivors told their stories. Admirals returned with broken voices, speaking of warships larger than moons. They described guns that split cruisers in a single volley. They spoke of shadows moving through the void, striking with perfect precision. And worst of all, they repeated the same words that echoed across every channel. You were warned. The council panicked. Some demanded peace, begging to send envoys to humanity. Others screamed for more fleets, more weapons, to crush this threat before it spread. But beneath their shouting lay the same truth. The Empire was afraid. Admiral Korath stood at the center of the chamber, his scales dull in the dim light. He had warned them, again and again, and now his words carried weight. Terrans do not bluff, he said quietly. Every fleet you send will vanish until nothing is left. His words echoed in the chamber like thunder. The younger senators shouted back, calling him a traitor, but even they could not hide the fear in their eyes. On distant worlds, whispers grew louder. Minor species who once bowed to the Empire now dared to hope. If the humans can stand against them, they whispered, perhaps the Empire can be broken. Merchants refused Imperial patrols. Miners refused taxes. Everywhere cracks began to spread, not from war but from fear. The Emperor's pride refused to bend. He slammed his fist on the council table, the impact shaking the chamber. We are the Empire, he roared. We do not kneel, not to humans, not to anyone. He ordered the construction of an even greater fleet. Every shipyard was to burn day and night, every weapon forged for one purpose, to crush Terran space. But even as the orders spread, unease filled the admirals. They had seen the truth. They knew numbers would not save them. Humanity had built warships in silence, hidden for centuries. And if those titans were only the beginning, what else waited in the dark? On a hidden outpost deep inside Terran space, General Armitage watched the galaxy's reaction with calm eyes. Reports showed panic spreading through the Empire, respect spreading among the weak. The general turned to his officers. They will come again, he said. They cannot accept defeat. One officer asked, should we strike first? Armitage shook his head. No, we defend. We do not conquer. We do not rule. We remind the galaxy of one truth: Terran space is closed. And so humanity waited. Their titans drifted in the dark, silent once more. But this time the galaxy was listening. Every star seemed sharper, every shadow heavier. The silence of Terran space was no longer ignored. It was feared. In the markets of distant colonies, traders whispered the story. Did you hear? The humans returned, the Empire's fleets burned. Children repeated the words, their eyes wide with awe. "You were warned," they mimicked. And the story spread like fire, not just as rumor, but as legend reborn. Back in the council chamber, Admiral Korath spoke again, his voice firm. "If you cross them once more, the Empire itself may not survive." But the Emperor's pride was blind. He snarled, "We will not be ruled by fear." And with that, the decision was sealed. Another war was coming. And this time it would not be silence that greeted them. It would be fire. The galaxy trembled. Every empire, every colony, every wandering ship knew the truth. The balance of power had shifted. The shadow of humanity stretched once more across the stars, and the Empire, so vast and proud, now stood on the edge of a war it could not win. Wrath of the Terrans. The Empire could not accept defeat. 2 fleets destroyed, a grand fleet shattered, yet pride still blinded them. On the imperial capital, the Emperor stood before his council, his voice sharp as a blade. "We will gather every ship, every weapon, and erase the Terrans from history," he declared. "Let the galaxy see the might of the Empire unleashed." Shipyards burned day and night. Millions of workers toiled under the whip, forging the greatest armada the stars had ever seen. The council whispered among themselves. Some begged for peace, others demanded war. But the Emperor's pride was louder than reason. The order was given. Launch the final assault. Soon the largest fleet in history rose from the docks. Thousands of ships, carriers, dreadnoughts, destroyers, all bound for Terran space. The galaxy watched with breath held tight. Would this final storm crush the silence of humanity? Or would the Empire itself fall? The fleet crossed the border. Engines burned bright, banners stretched across the sky. Admirals boasted on open channels. This time, Terran silence will be broken. Their myths will end. But the crews were uneasy. Every shadow felt heavier, every star colder. They remembered what happened before. They knew silence meant death. Inside Terran space, the humans waited. Their titans drifted like mountains in the void, silent and patient. General Armitage stood at the command deck, his voice calm. "They will come with everything," he said, "but we are ready." Around Yao. Him? Officers nodded. No one trembled, no one doubted. They had prepared for centuries for this moment. The Empire's fleet advanced deeper. At first no resistance came. Admirals laughed, broadcasting across the stars. "See, the Terrans hide again. Their silence is fear." But then the silence broke. From the dark, the Terran warships awoke. Hundreds, then thousands, uncloaked at once. The void lit up with their outlines. Titans larger than any Imperial dreadnought. Their guns glowed with energy. Their hulls glimmered like iron suns. And then the voice came, calm and merciless. "You were warned." The first volley tore through the Imperial lines. Ships exploded, like glass under a hammer. Entire squadrons vanished in fire. Carriers split open, their wreckage drifting like shattered bones. The Empire tried to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the Terran Titans. Railguns, planetary cannons, stealth bombers all rained destruction with precision. On every world the galaxy watched in horror. Screens glowed with images of the battle. For the first time, the truth was undeniable. Humanity was not weak, not forgotten. Humanity was wrath. Admiral Korath, forced to lead one of the Imperial wings, fought with heavy heart. He watched his comrades burn, his ships torn apart. He whispered to himself, "They should have listened. They should have listened." His comms filled with screams of dying crews. But over it all, the Terran voice echoed again. "This is your last warning. Leave Terran space." The Emperor, watching from the capital, raged. He demanded his fleet push forward. He ordered them to break the Terran lines, but his words were drowned by reality. One by one, his ships fell. No strategy, no numbers. No pride could save them. Hours passed, and the largest fleet in history was gone. The void was filled with wreckage, flames drifting like stars. The Terran warships held the line, never crossing their border. They did not chase. They did not conquer. They defended and they destroyed. The voice came one final time. It was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. Calm, steady, undeniable. Terran space is closed. Cross again, and you die. Silence followed. But this silence was not weakness. It was power. The galaxy understood. Humanity had returned, and they would not bow on the imperial capital. The council sat broken. Senators whispered of surrender, others of rebellion. The emperor sat in silence, his pride shattered for the first time in centuries. The empire trembled, and across the stars the smaller races lifted their heads. They saw the empire bleed, and they saw hope. Hope born not from shadows, but from Terran fire. They remembered the old stories, and now they knew the truth. The humans had warned them. The humans had returned, and the humans would never be ignored again. The galaxy would never forget the day Terran wrath was unleashed.